You're a guest. So glad you decided to come here and worship with us. Wherever you are from, whatever life has thrown your way, God is still in control. And that's what we're going to learn over the course of this next series. Glad you're here in the beginning of the series as we explore the life of Naomi. Now, I'm sure, like what Kyle said, at some point, we've all had those days where everything seems to go wrong. All of us at some point have been there. And if you haven't been in there, buckle up, it'll come. At some point you feel like, oh my goodness, this day is horrible. And then it becomes not a day, but a week. And then a week turns into a month, and a month turns into years. No, don't worry, it's not gonna be a depressive sermon, just in the beginning. And so maybe you're here this morning, you're thinking, oh my goodness, is it gonna get any worse? So sometimes life is not fair. And what we're going to see and find over the course of this next series is that Naomi and her family in the book of Ruth have that harsh discovery. A life of disruption, a life of upside down. Many of you have been in that upside down place where you feel like, man, life is just turned upside down and it's very, very difficult. An unexpected opportunity turns into your unexpected nightmare. The unexpected challenge that comes into your relationship, you're like, I didn't expect that. And as we explore the story of Naomi and Ruth and all the characters, all the people, historical people in that story, we're going to see that they have something in common with you and I. Because at the beginning, as we see this shaken world, we're going to see famine, we're going to see loss and instability, economic instability, moral instability. And the story that kind of lingers over the whole book is this one, and that is life better somewhere else? Ever been there? Like, is life better somewhere else? Or would things be easier if I just made this one change? Would life be easier? That's what we call the green grass syndrome, right? As the grass greener on the other side, we have some donkeys behind our house, not ours, some of the neighbors, right? And boy, those donkeys really like to go past the wiring fence with their necks and try and get grass on the other side, which actually does look greener. It's not that it's better, but they have their own grass. Come on, get your own grass, right? Grass always seems greener on the other side. That relationship looks better than what you see internally, You see the Facebook, you're like, oh, that grass is green. But then you get into the relationship and you realize it's not that green. You look at that job, the ideal job, you're like, man, that job is awesome. That's greener grass. But then you ask an employee in that job, they're like, man, this is not good. Grass always seems greener on the other side. As a matter of fact, Irma Bombeck said it this way: the grass is always greener over the septic tank. Man, that's a lush grass. It's really green. It may look good on the surface, but you don't know what's underneath, right? A lot of times that's life. What we think it's greener, it's really a septic tank. And underneath that, you're like, man, it's a whole lot of doo-doo. You just don't want that fertilizer. And the story of Ruth takes place during the time of Judges. It's a season where they had national leaders. It wasn't the season of kings yet. It was leaders that would just rise up, appointed by God. And then during this season in the life of Israel, it was a time where people didn't know their right hand from their left hand. They just didn't know how to make wise choices. There's a lot of moral confusion, political upheaval, and instability spiritually. There was a lot of depravity. And then you find yourself in this little vignette, this little story, and you find that not only was it just like a wreck, messy, but on top of that, Bethlehem, the future birthplace of Jesus, becomes a place of famine. A place of famine. And then some tough choices need to be made. Everyday people facing empty fields, empty tables, and tough choices in a broken world. Now, I got to warn you that we're going to get very Bible nerd here this morning, a little bit more than usual. This is one of the classes that I took from translating the Hebrew to the English, And so we dug deep in that. So I'm going to try not to lose you in there, but there's a lot of cool little nuggets. There's a lot of cool little nuggets as it relates to people's names, as it relates to the area. And this is going to be pretty cool, but I'm going to be nerd with you. And maybe after today, you're going to be also a Bible nerd. Who knows? But the big question I'm trying to answer specifically this morning is this: what do you do when our stability in life is shattered? When you thought that this was stable, whatever that this is, all of a sudden it's not that stable anymore. What do you do? Where is God when our world is disrupted? Where is he? Those are common questions that we tend to ask. Where is he now? I'm glad you asked. Ruth chapter 1, verse 1. Go there with me. Grab your Bibles. Go to U version, or get the paper Bible and go to Ruth chapter 1, verse 1. I'm going to be pausing at several points here, just kind of unpack it. And it reads like this: in the days when the judges ruled. Again, these are the days of a lot of immorality, a lot of depravity. There was a famine in the land, no food. So a man from Bethlehem, pause here for just a moment. Bethlehem. Do you realize that the word Bethlehem is house of bread? You see the irony? In the house of bread, there's no bread. There's a famine. So a man from Bethlehem, the house of bread in Judah, there's no bread, together with his wife and his 2 sons, went to live for a while. In other words, it was a temporary thing. They're like, we're going to move, it's temporary, for a while, in the country of Moab. Stop here for just a second. The Moabites, they were very adversarial, a lot of conflict with the Moabites and the Jewish people. They had a god, Chemosh, which they would sacrifice children to. Horrifying community, horrifying country. And God, at some point, has said, don't hang out with the Moabites. Don't have women that are Moabites. Don't go there. Don't move there. And here you have this man who's wrecked. He's like, man, there's no house there's no bread in the house of God. He moves to Moab. The man's name was Elimelech. Elimelech, the name, means God is my king. Can you imagine you grow up and you're like, hey, God is my king. That's this guy's name. Elimelech, my God is king. Supposed to represent his very life and how he deals with people and what he does with his faith. Elimelech. You can almost name a boy Elimelech. If you do that, let me know. I can bless the boy. If you have a child that's Elimelech. This guy's Elimelech. His wife's name was Naomi. Anybody know what Naomi means? Pleasant. Oh, pleasant. Pleasant until she's not pleasant, right? She's pleasant. That's her name. I'm pleasant. That's her name. When she comes back, at some point we're going to see her return back. You know what she's going to say to call her? Mara, which means bitterness. She says, don't call me pleasant, call me bitter. And then she says, why? We'll get to that here in the future. His wife Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were, check it out, Mahlon and Chilion. Literally in the Hebrew, their names mean sickly and weakly, or fragile, or wasting away. How about them apples? If you try and name your kids sickly and weakly, I'm going to try and discourage you from doing that. Mahlon and Chilion. Now, so you may be wondering, now, what's the deal with our names? Is this one of those deals where after the fact, you're recalling a historical account, you forget their names, and so you call them Mahlon and Chilion, right? Well, no. Actually, most scholars think, and so do I, although not a scholar, think that what Jewish families would do is they would name their children with these biblical names, the heroes of their faith. And in part was to project their hope and desire of their kids. You know, that's what they're hoping they would live up to their name. In some occasions, what they would do is they would name their children on the basis of what they looked like when they were born. So imagine your mama, your dad, you're looking at your kids. Oh, Mahlon, he's sickly. And Kilion, oh, he's just fragile, right? You would hope they don't live up to their names, but we're going to see that they might actually live up to their names. And they were Ephrathites. What does that mean? That's the family that first inhabited Bethlehem, which means they were well known. It means they were well connected. It was a family that people would have known. Oh, yeah, that's from that family. Probably high reputation. And they were from Bethlehem in Judah, and they went to Moab and lived there. The expression lived there is no longer temporal. It now has become, they remained there. And this is where we get our first principle, our first thing of how to deal with life when you're upside down, when everything is upside down, when it is disrupted. And it's this way: trust God's rule when life feels out of control. Got to trust God. Trust his leadership when it seems like it's out of control. With empty pantries and hungry kids, you can imagine why Elimelech, God is my king, would choose to go to Moab. To the area where God at some point had said, I don't want you there. He packs his bag, he gets his little, U-Haul perhaps, and he starts moving in that direction. Moab is only about 50 miles away. You can almost see it from the Dead Sea out in the distance. It would be like the distance from here to Schertz, or the distance from here to Victoria, or from here to little past San Marcos. Not that far, but far enough to be outside of the will of God. Isn't that ironic that sometimes you're like, oh, it's just a little, detour, and all, next thing you know it, you're like, okay, this is not a detour. This is already outside the will of God. And Moab is known as a wash pot. In Psalms, you hear it described that way. What's a wash pot? It's a pot of water that you use to clean your feet with. Dirty. And God says Moab is his wash pot. It's underneath him. It's beneath God. It's a dirty place. It's like almost going from the pantry to the trash can. Bethlehem, the house of bread, the pantry to trash can, Moab. And maybe the grass was greener. Maybe they weren't going through a famine just like Israel was at the time. But maybe just because it's greener doesn't mean that it's better. And they're soon going to find that out for themselves. Their names meaning what they mean. We're going to see a little bit later. Orpah, not related to our Oprah Winfrey. Thank goodness. But Orpah, which means back of the neck or stiff-necked. We're going to see how she responds to her mother-in-law in a little bit and see why her name is very characteristic of her. And then we're going to see Ruth, which means loyal friend or comforter. Ironically enough, she's going to live out her identity as her name. Now, we got to remember, though, as we continue in this passage, and that we got to trust God's rule, even when it seems like life is out of control, that God is still on the throne, even when the world looks out of control. And boy, nowadays, you turn on the TV, you turn on YouTube, and you see that, like, it's out of control. And we wonder, like, oh, when, God, why? It's like God is still in control. It's like when the economy tanks or jobs disappear and it feels like everything is falling apart around you. And it looks like no one is in charge. You have to remind yourself, God is still in charge. In Psalm 22, verse 28, the psalmist put it this way. He said, "For dominion belongs to the Lord, and he rules over the nations." He even rules over Moab. God wasn't stepping out of his throne. He hasn't stepped out of his throne in your life. He's still in charge, even when it feels like life is out of control. And so here's a gentle reminder for you. Don't run to the greener grass when life is hard. Instead, ask, how is God testing my faith right here, right now? Because hard times are often God's way of saying, trust me more, not you should run away. So many times we just want to run away. Just like Elimelech. Boy, it's tough. We're going to literally move away from this space. Only to realize how tough that would really be to his family. Here's the second point when your life is disrupted. Remember God's goodness even when life hurts. Remember his goodness even when life hurts. Go to verse 3. Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died. The guy who was running from death dies. The guy who picked up his bags, took his family, and moved away 50 miles away to save his family, he dies. And if you thought he could escape the names of the children, it says, and she was left with her 2 sons. So Naomi has 2 sons still. They married Moabite women. The very thing God had warned him about and said, don't do that. Because when you marry somebody who doesn't know God, over time you start to drift away from God. So one was named Orpah and the other Ruth. After they had lived there about, how many years? Help me out. How many years? 10 years. Is that temporary? Oh, no, not at 10 years. You're locked in at 10 years. You're not going anywhere. At least not for the foreseeable future. They're locked in 10 years. That's building a life. That's seeing there's 2 sons marry and marry women that are outside of the faith and yet no children yet. That's important. No children yet. At the end of the book, we'll see what God has in store for them in terms of children. After they had lived there for about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also, what? Sickly and fragile. They died. They lived up to their name, or lived down to the grave to their name. And all of a sudden, she finds herself with 3 grave sites. She was left without her sons, their 2 sons, and her husband. So here's the story of like, what do you do when you begin to remove yourself from the very presence of God and you start drifting just a little bit for the sake of, quote, your family? When you run away from God's will in your life, you thought it was tough. It gets tougher. And the Moabites, like I said, they didn't worship God. They worshiped this false god, Chemosh. A false god indeed. And they're risking drifting from God by marrying these young women, ladies from Moab. And here we see Naomi goes from empty pantries to empty seats in her household. The table is not full anymore. The table is lacking conversation and talk and celebration and sticking with one another. She buries her husband in a foreign land, not where her family was buried, not where they had deep roots in, but like a stranger in a foreign land, defaming even his very name by doing so. And this raises like a painful, real question for us, and that is this: if God is good, why does he allow my life to feel so bad? Ever wondered that privately in your head? If God is so good, why does he allow me to feel so bad? You have to remember God's goodness even when life hurts. In Romans chapter 8, verse 28, Paul answering this question says, and we know that in all things, how many things? All things, not some, not in, others, not some areas, not some other ones. In all things, God works for the good. He doesn't say God deems all that you're going through good. He doesn't say that. Some things are not good. Violations into your body or violations into your world, your childhood, those weren't good, right? The pain that was caused by a loved one, that's not God saying that was a good situation. Rather, what Paul is saying is that God will turn that situation for your own good. Isn't that something? That we serve a God that's like, I know you're struggling. And I know that's not good. But I'm going to turn that situation and make it for your own good. But it's not for the world, though. In that passage, it says, for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Guys, that's you and me. That's us. That's the family of faith. That's us that are in the family of God. That's who that's for. It's not for the stranger who doesn't know Jesus. It's not for the person who is going through some calamity. And I know good-hearted people like you and like me, we tell people, it's like, hey, don't worry. God is still working in your life. And as good as that sounds, and I'm not saying you say anything else, but as good, as God is, it's like, no, the promise is for us. Now, don't go on and tell people like, man, that really sucks what you're going through. God has no hope for you. Don't do that. Don't do that because you don't know if that person is going to meet Jesus because of their circumstance. God is good even when life doesn't feel good. Think about the parent who tells the child, you're not going to have that. I'm going to take that away from you. And the child's like having a temper tantrum about it. And you as a parent know this is the best decision for my child. One of my kids, I won't say who, because she may or may not still be coming to this church because she may or may not be in college. But one of my kids, at some point, she's not here. If she was here, she'd be like super red, mortified. So this is our little secret. Shh, don't tell Zoe. I mean, don't tell my child. At some point, several months ago, like by several months, almost a year ago, she got, she was in her iPad, and we were like, you know what? I don't know that you can be trusted with this. And we're like, it was a hard choice, by the way. But usually what we do is like, what would you do if you were punishing yourself or you were having the consequences? And kids always choose the extreme, like put me outside like forever, live in the shed, you don't have to feed me. It's like, no, settle down. No, I'm not going on, we're not going all or nothing or extreme. I was like, okay, well, we're going to have to take the laptop, the iPad. And you know what? She's almost in a year not having it. And it's not because we haven't been wanting to give it back. It's like, we keep on going to, is it really good for her? No, help me out. Is not having an iPad going to somehow kill her? She can kill you all? No, it's not. Is she somehow missing current events? Not really, because Dad is always watching YouTube and the news, so she's not missing out. Is she missing out on maybe some phrases that her teens or their kids use, her friends use? Probably not. She picks it up at school. Is she missing out on all these websites or YouTube videos? It's like, man, it's horrifying. Yeah. And you know what? That's not a bad thing. Now, parents, don't go extreme on me. Go home. You're like, oh, yeah, Pastor Jesse, he did it with his daughter, so I'm taking off your iPad and your phone, your laptop. You know what? I'm taking everything, your TV, everything out. Measure yourself. And you know what? That might be a good thing. But you've got to make that decision on the basis of what's good for my child right now. Right? That's like God with us. When he sees us, like, you may not like this, but it's just good for you. And that's really hard to digest. Really hard. But you can't measure God by your struggle or through your pain, because your filter of God will be so distorted. You have to filter God through the filter of his goodness. Of his goodness. And trusting his hand. Number 3, you have to be aware of compromise that turns into detours. Compromise that turns into detours. What do we see in verse 1? he went to live there for a while, right? It was more like, well, for a little bit. And then verse 2, we see this, oh no, they settled there. They remained there. And then eventually in verse 4, it's like, oh no, they've been there for 10 years. They went from little compromise to bigger compromise to now we don't even know that we're compromising. We've stayed there for 10 years. And isn't that like life? It's just, this doesn't hurt, this little temptation. It doesn't hurt. And it's a little, and then a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. That's how compromise works. Just one decision, one click, one sip, and can turn into years away from God's goodness in your life, his best for your life. Elimelech thought he could protect his household by leaving and going to Moab. And he lost everything. The very thing he didn't want to lose is the very thing he lost. Small compromises can grow into life-changing detours. Some of you are on a detour. Maybe you've been in a detour for a long time. It's time to get off of that path. It's time to settle your compromises and turn those compromises into acts of obedience. Small compromises can grow into life-changing detours. Have you ever bought something for X price, only to realize that repairing that something is more than the price you paid for it? You feel bamboozled, but you're the one that paid for it. You're like, oh my goodness, like this is not good, That's what Elimelech did. That's what his family did. I want you to ask yourself, what compromises am I justifying today that may lead me further away from God tomorrow? What are you doing today that's going to result in being outside of God's will tomorrow? Number 4, look for God's providence and disruption. Look for God's providence and disruption. Verse 6, it says, when Naomi heard in Moab, again, the author's emphasizing this, she's in Moab. When Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them, she and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. The famine in Bethlehem ends. God provided bread once again to the house of bread. His invisible hand was moving all along. Maybe it wasn't seen, maybe it wasn't observable, but even in that decade, God was still working. God's visible hand is what we call miracle. God's invisible hand, the one you don't see at work, is what's called providence. And this story is all about God's providence. It's all about God's providence. You might not see him in your life working, but just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not happening. Matter of fact, you can guarantee it, because he's a God that works in this area of providence. So look for God's providence in your disruption. Instead of being fixated so much into the negative, and it's like, this is horrible, this is, just overwhelming, this is not going to work. Instead of focusing so much on what's going wrong, start focusing on what God may be doing. And only then may you start realizing that, oh my goodness, God is doing a lot. It's like driving at night. You put your headlights, you only see part of the road, right? It doesn't mean there's no more part after the part you see. The same thing with God. You only see certain perspective, to a certain extent, you see what he wants you to see. But that doesn't mean he's not working. It's like having the headlights at night. There's still a road ahead of you. Unless you hit a ditch, then there's something else. Look for God's providence and disruptions. God is working even when we don't see it. Instead of asking, where is God? Boy, many of us have crossed that bridge. Where is God? Ask, what might God be doing behind the scenes that I just can't see right now? Just can't see it right now. odds are this is going to take you a while before you look back into your story and you're like, man, I saw him at work. I see him, how he worked, but I just didn't see it back then. Trust that he's writing a bigger story than the one you're living currently, because he is. As long as you have breath, there's still a story that's unfolding in your life. And respond wisely, number 5, to disruption. That's something we all need to hear. Respond wisely. Here's 3 suggestions on that category. Protect what God has entrusted to you. Elimelech, he was entrusted with his family. His heritage, and the worship of God. As a man, he was entrusted your household, a spiritual leader in your house. Don't depart from this, you know. You got to protect what God has entrusted you, your household, your financial resources, your time that he's entrusted to you, to use it wisely. Number 2, reject the lie that God causes evil. Reject the lie that God causes evil. And I've heard it in a funeral a couple years back, and I heard it at the Lent service, same, preacher, talk about this idea that, she died. It was a funeral. It was like, he died. The devil took him. Man, it took everything for me not to stand. He was like, no. It was a funeral, so I couldn't do that. And I need to be respectful. But I disagree. That's basically saying God doesn't have enough control. He's not big enough. He's not strong enough to prevent the evil one from doing anything. The devil took him. No, he didn't. The devil does everything that God allows him to do. And, the devil is disruptive, and he's looking for people. He's crawling around like a lion looking for people to devour. That's just the nature of the devil. But oftentimes we give him way too much credit. It's like going back to the garden. Adam blames Eve. Eve blames who? The serpent. And the serpent is just taking the credit, smiling. He doesn't say no. He's taking credit by not saying anything. And why am I bringing this up? It's because oftentimes in a moment of crisis, we forget that maybe, just maybe, we had a little piece of the pie of responsibility. And we're not getting there because we feel uncomfortable. We'd rather blame someone or some entity outside of us than to say, man, I really made a bad choice, and I'm eating the consequences of that bad choice. I don't like it, folks, because the best thing that can happen in your life is to own up the piece of the pie that's your responsibility. Evil comes from sin in a broken world. Evil comes from our flesh, our world system, and the devil. And sometimes those 3 work together, and sometimes they work independent from one another. James, the half-brother of Jesus, put it this way in James chapter 1, verse 13. He said, when tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me. And again, this is more like temptation towards sin. Not like, I was trying to not eat the ding-dong and the Twinkie, and I just had to. I impulsively went. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about temptation towards sin. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. He's not the one putting the carrot out there like, try this evil thing. That's not God. That's not his nature to do that. Number 3, you got to submit your disruptions to God in prayer. When hard times hit, you can just tough it out and let them hard times hit you. Or you can run away and let you kind of eat the circumstances. If you take it head on, it'll beat you down. If you say, all right, I'm going to run from it, it'll tear you up from the inside. Or you can lean on God and let him use those struggles to make you stronger. Some have said that, like Christians, their crutch is Christianity, or following Jesus is their crutch. You know what? It is our crutch. Our crutch is Jesus. We're weak enough. Where we are weak, he is strong. And when we are weak, he is working mightily to expand his name, to show how good he is, and how glorious he is. When you are at your weakest, he is at his strongest in your life. Don't deny him the strength he's about to demonstrate in and through your life, which will bring himself glory as people see how you respond in life. Don't waste your disruption. Let God use it to shape you. That's my point. Don't waste your disruption. It's not for nothing. God's going to use it for your good and for his glory. Could it be that the fruits of the Spirit can only be squeezed out? Patience, kindness, love, self-control, perseverance can only be squeezed out of your life as you interact and struggle with conflict and people and circumstances. I want to suggest to you that yes, the answer is yes. We always hear like people saying, don't ask for patience because, God's going to give you all these things. You're going to develop your patience. Guys, do pray for patience, but just know that patience is coming. Do pray for self-control and the fruits of the Spirit. I'm not saying pray for hardship. I'm not saying that. But if that's what it takes to develop that, God, it's not above God to say, I'm going to allow that to happen. Just like he did with Elimelech. My God is king. Elimelech wants to serve another leader in a different country. All right, go do it. Pray, Lord, what do you want to do in my life through this disruption? What do you want me to do, God? How do you want me to react or act or respond during this really tough situation? Instead of why me, why this, why now, like what are you doing, God? Show me how you're growing me. What looked like an ending for Naomi was really a setup for God's redemption story. There's going to be a redemption story, not just of Naomi. This book, really, the title wasn't put by God, by the way. Those people that were translating, like, the book of Ruth. The title really ought to be like the book of Naomi. Because this is about how God's going to redeem Naomi through his daughter-in-law, how God is going to make a way to continue this lineage, which should have been destroyed in Moab. It's like teaser alert, it's the ending. Like he's going to this, God's going to come invade their space and be like, your household should be done with. Instead, from that household will emerge King David. And from that household will emerge the King of glory, Jesus. Do you see what God is doing? It's not just about Naomi or Ruth and their well-sake, their well-being. It's about Jesus. All the Bible center point relies on Jesus. And there's no exception in this book. Jesus is the redemption story that's been going on since Genesis chapter 1. In chapter 3, when the earth was distorted and sin entered and the curse was abounding, it's about Jesus' return back as the King of glory. But you can't have a King of glory if there's not a family that's bearing the name of which he's coming from. Do you see how important this story is to the big story? This little vignette, this little story sets up the redemption story. And it's also a reminder to you and I that he can take the worst messes. You may be in a mess. You walked in with a mess. You're hoping that you get cleaned up from the mess. He can take the worst mess of your lives and turn them into fresh starts in ways you never imagined or thought of or anticipated or planned out. God can start a fresh start in your life by helping you with your messes. And I'm going to end with this one nugget. I need you to remind yourself of this one nugget. Famine in God's will is always better than a feast outside of it. Right? Famine in God's will always, no exception, will always be better than a feast outside of it. Boy, they were feasting in Moab. But they're outside the will of God. In days of poverty and struggle, it's always better to just hunker down and be like, okay, God, you're in my life. I'm going to rest in you, rely on you. Versus ejecting. Ejecting is the easier part. Staying is the tougher part. So stay in there.